Delivering a tap device involves a 3-appointment process from start to finish.
According to my wife, I snore quite a bit.
Once you have identified a patient who is a candidate for tap therapy, you will schedule the patient for a comprehensive oral exam and evaluation. At the first appointment, it is important that you discuss how the therapy works and what the patient should expect from treatment. An effective way to educate the patient is to use a mid-sagittal anatomical model of the head to point out the mechanics of airway collapse during sleep. The model helps the patient visualize how the airway opens as the jaw is pulled forward by the device. You can explain that pulling the jaw forward to open the airway is the first step of CPR. To demonstrate the tap, you should show the patient it is comprised of 2 separate appliances. The appliance with the hook goes on the upper teeth. The lower appliance has a bar and shelf and fits on the lower teeth. You can demonstrate how once the appliances are in the mouth, that the 2 pieces engage by hooking the lower appliance onto the upper appliance. You will then need to conduct a thorough oral and head and neck exam, including the pharynx. Airway management recommends that you use polyvinyl siloxane to take an impression. Excellent impressions are imperative. Pay particular attention to recording the distal of the most distal mandibular tooth bilaterally. The tap gauge is a new tool that will help you to know where to set the patient's starting position. The tap gauge can also help you track the effects of oral appliance therapy on the oral facial structures. Airway management recommends that you measure and document patients' range of motion at every visit. Today, the dentist will take a registration at a 6 mm vertical height. There are 2 other inserts that can be used to take a registration at 9 mm and 12 mm vertical, respectively. To take a bite registration using the tap gauge, place the gauge in the mouth so that the upper centrals fit in the notch on the upper member. Have the patient close into the notch on the lower member so that the midline of the lower incisors corresponds to the midline of the notch. Have the patient protrude and retrude 3 to 4 times until you get consistent readings. Record both the most retrusive and protrusive positions. In this case, the patient's range of motion is -5 mm to +7 mm. Airway management recommends that patients' bite registration is taken at approximately 60% of maximum protrusion. In this case, the bite gauge will be set at +2 mm. Heat approximately 1 ounce of Thermacryl Plus beads in hot water until the material becomes putty-like. Place a 3 mm thick layer or roll on the upper surface of the bite fork and place on upper teeth. Place the gauge back into the mouth and retest protrusion. If it's the same, set and lock the gauge at +2 mm. Next, repeat this process on the lower portion of the bite fork. Once the material is on the lower surface of the bite fork, place the gauge on the upper teeth and have the patient close into the notch on the lower member, making sure that the patient's midline corresponds to the gauge's midline. Be sure to record the most anterior and posterior teeth in the registration. Let the registration cool completely. Retry the registration in the mouth to verify that you took an accurate bite. Fill out the prescription form and send the impressions and the bite registration to the lab. Be sure to record the range of motion as measured by the tap gauge on the form. Now you are ready to send the prescription, impressions, and bite registration to the lab for the tap to be fabricated for the patient. The second appointment that you will have with the patient is the delivery appointment. Prior to this appointment, the lab will have sent you the finished appliance for the patient. The lab will send you a package that contains 1 upper tray and lower tray, a storage case, an adjustment key, instructions for use, and 1 AM aligner. Notice that there is a sheet of stickers included with the tap. Each sticker has the device's lot number on it. It's important to put one of these stickers in the patient's records. There are several steps that need to be taken prior to the delivery appointment. Before you fit the patient with the device, inspect it to make sure that the pieces are not damaged and are free from physical or cosmetic defects. If there is the slightest indication that the device may be damaged or defective, do not fit it. Prior to inserting the device, run the tap under warm water. This makes it easier for the patient to insert the device. Hand the upper tray to the patient. Instruct the patient to fit it over the upper teeth and press up using his thumbs. Have the patient remove the upper appliance by pulling down on the most posterior edge on one side. Now, if the trays are too tight, make the appropriate adjustments. In this instance, the dentist adjusts the soft inner lining with the bristle brush. Hand the appliance back to the patient and ask whether there are any other areas of discomfort. The patient identifies that the device is pinching his gum. If this occurs with your patient, you will need to lower the height of the flange. Repeat the same process to fit the lower tray. Once both the upper and lower appliances fit comfortably, have the patient place both trays in his mouth. They should snap over the teeth, but not uncomfortably. There are two ways to teach the patient how to engage the hook on the lower tray. You can either instruct the patient to hook the trays together outside of the mouth before putting the appliance in the mouth, or you can have the patient put each tray in separately and then guide the patient into the proper position where the hook is engaged. Have the patients practice this skill once or twice. Have the patient practice hooking and unhooking the device. Also, show the patient how he can slide his jaw side to side while the hook is engaged. Check for contact in the posterior area, then check for lateral movement. Now, while the patient is wearing the device, ask the patient questions to make sure that you have achieved the right fit. Ask the patient if the jaw feels comfortable when the hook is engaged. Ask if the trays are tight, but not uncomfortable. And be sure that there is an equal fit in all areas and that the device is smooth on the inside and is comfortable to the tongue. Double check that the patient is capable of inserting and removing the upper and lower appliances. Once the device is properly fit, it's time to teach the patient how to titrate the device at home and adjust the hook position while the tap is in his mouth. Make sure that the hook is set at the most retruded position. This is the starting position. With both trays in his mouth and hooked together, adjust the patient's jaw forward using the adjustment key. Turning the key to the patient's left shoulder while the tap is in his mouth will advance the hook and bring the patient's jaw forward. 1/2 turn is equal to 1/4 millimeter. Have the patient practice turning the key and moving his jaw forwards and backwards. Next, show the patient how to advance the hook when the tap is out of his mouth. In this case, the key needs to be turned clockwise to advance the hook. Discuss the titration schedule with the patient. Instruct him to make 1/2 turn of advancement every 3rd night until he stops snoring or his symptoms subside. Tell the patient to call your office if he has any problems with the device or if he experiences any discomfort while titrating the device. Sometimes patients feel that their bite is not normal when they wake up in the morning after wearing the tap device. As part of tap therapy, you will make another appliance for the patient to use in the morning to reposition his jaw. This appliance is called the AM aligner. Essentially, the AM aligner will counteract the forces placed on the jaw during the night and will serve as a guide to ensure that the patient can get his bite back to its original place in the morning. To make an AM aligner, heat the wafer in hot water until it's floppy. Place the AM aligner over the patient's upper teeth with 2 millimeters showing beyond the facial and buccal of the upper teeth. Then have the patient remove the AM aligner. Hold the AM aligner up to a light. You should see transparency in areas of occlusal contact. If the patient did not bite hard enough, there will be no light shining through the material, and if this happens, heat the AM aligner and repeat taking the bite. Finally, trim the AM aligner to the gingival edge of the lower teeth. Have the patient put the AM aligner back in his mouth and check for fit. Next, you will teach the patient how to do a morning jaw exercise while wearing the AM aligner. Have the patient replace the appliance in his mouth and have him slide his lower jaw into a protrusive position and squeeze, and then into a retrusive position and then squeeze. Instruct the patient that each morning he should insert the AM aligner and repeat the exercise until his bite feels normal again. Typically, patients repeat the jaw exercise several times and then continue to wear the AM aligner for 10 to 30 minutes.
You got your key in here.
Before the patient leaves, make sure you instruct the patient on how to care for his device. Then give the patient his new tap device, a copy of the home care instructions, and the patient instruction booklet that came from the lab. The patient will need to return for a follow-up appointment in about 3 weeks after you deliver the TAP device. At this appointment, you will ask the patient whether or not he has had any problems wearing the TAP appliance and if he noticed any changes in his symptoms. Your discussion should help you assess the patient's ability to use the device and evaluate the likelihood the titration is making a difference. At this appointment, be sure to check the device to see if it has been damaged in any way. Airway management recommends following up with the patient with overnight oximetry. If the patient is not within normal limits, repeat the nocturnal oximetry in 2 weeks. These results should be communicated to the patient's physician, who may order a sleep study. For more information on this, please contact Airway Management. When the patient returns for his checkup, review the follow-up home sleep test results with him. If the study shows that the test results are within normal limits, then the patient can be referred back to his primary care doctor for any further follow-up testing. If the results are not within normal limits, have the patient continue to titrate the device at home and schedule a second follow-up home sleep test and appointment 3 weeks later. Once the patient's optimal treatment position has been achieved, you can put him on an annual recall schedule. Be sure to remind the patient to contact your office if he experiences any problems with the device or if his symptoms change.